Who's looking forward to the day of judgment? That is what we are waiting for, also known as the coming of Christ, the second coming, or the day of Christ, the day of judgment. The first thing I did when I joined my first Episcopal church in 2003 was to start a Bible study. It was going to be a year-long study. And there were 7 of us in the group, 2 women and 5 men. The group was being led by a man who had a Southern Baptist background. I have a Roman Catholic background. And at some point in the readings, we were talking about the second coming and the day of judgment and what that would be like. And he said, how would you feel if Jesus walked in the room right now and said, this is it, the second coming? And the other woman said, I would cower in a corner. And I said, I would also cower in the corner, and I would say, I tried. I really did try. And he goes, what? He said, well, I would run right up to him and go, hey, Jesus! The other 4 men didn't want to play the game. So they didn't say anything. And I've thought about that a lot, why I said I would cower in the corner and say, I tried. Because I was raised Catholic, and what we were taught is, there's the good things you did and the bad things you did, and you should go to confession now and then to wipe away, literally the nun erased it, to erase it away, and then you're going to sin again, so you got to go back and erase it again the next time you go to confession. And I had this picture that when I died or whenever this thing happened, that I had to have more of the good things than the bad things, and they kind of weighed and go, okay, maybe. And we were always told, God is the judge. There will be a judgment day, kind of like you're going to court to be judged. That was my notion of judgment. Well, we have all sorts of discussion about the second coming and the day of judgment, both in the First Testament of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, and the New Testament, or the Second Testament, both from ancient prophets and from Jesus himself. He talks about it a lot. Interestingly, on this Sunday, the Episcopal Church gives us an alternate reading of a prophet, the one you heard from Baruch. I prepared a sermon on Malachi because I forgot that I told Sarah we were going to use Baruch today. Doesn't matter. They're both talking about that day. And Baruch is really emphasizing the positive. He said, you are looking for salvation, and it is coming. He was speaking to an oppressed people, the exiled people who'd been kicked out of Jerusalem and left in Babylon with nothing, with their families destroyed and so on. And he was saying, God is coming. Get up on the hill, raise your heads, and look. Call the children from east and west. You are going to be saved. It's all great news. Malachi was writing to a slightly different audience. We think it might have been around the same time, in fact. And Malachi is the one who says, who shall stand when he appears? For he is like the refiner's fire. Now, the reason he said that is that his audience were the Israelites who were returning, and they were mad at God for not completely destroying Babylon. Well, don't worry, because King Darius is coming later. But they wanted to see it now. If we're the good guys and they're the bad guys, send fire and brimstone down to them. And he says that from the Lord of hosts, who shall stand when he appears? You've probably heard it in the Messiah sing-along, right? And he's a refiner's fire, right? The thing is, neither of those are a bad representation of the day of judgment. The picture of a refiner's fire is that we are silver, and God is going to purify us by burning away the things that are not pure, that have taken away our beauty and have tarnished us, and it's going to cleanse us and purify us. Some of the most beautiful songs from the Messiah are about this, and you can come hear that on the 14th and 15th at this church. Or is it 14th and 15th? Yeah. The reason that we fear judgment is because of human judgments. It's because the experience we've had of being judged. Now, you'll often hear people say that they're not Christian or they don't like Christians, they don't go to church because church is so judgmental. and people in church are so judgy. I'm sure you've heard that from people. I won't go to church anymore because they're so judgmental. Well, I've been going to church for a long time, and I don't think I've ever really been judged in church. Well, there's one way, previous church, yes, okay. Every Sunday, there's one person. But really, for people in the pews, how often do you say, I went to church today and I felt so judged by those people at church? It's not really what's going on for us at church. But we are judged by teachers, by spouses, by clergy, by the government, by the neighbors, and so on. And we have a negative picture of judgment. I'll give you an example. When I was in 8th grade, I was in the school band. I also played piano at home, and my best friends, I had 2 flutists among my best friends and a very talented clarinetist. She was first chair clarinet, I was second chair clarinet my entire time in junior high because she was so good. And our music teacher liked us to go to the California Music Educators Association festivals every year. And you went and you performed for a judge, often in a room where people could sit, like friends and family could sit and hear you play. And if you were playing one of those wind instruments and solo, you usually had an accompanist. So I was my friend's accompanist. I was fine with that. Accompanying isn't necessarily easy, but it was easier for me not to be the one being judged, right? So I would just play along. And my friends always did quite well. The great clarinetist, she would often get a command performance or a 1. You were rated. Command performance, you're so good, you get to play it again in front of an audience. Number 1, that's like an A. 2, I'd say B+, maybe B. And 3 was bad, and nobody I know ever got a 3, ever. So we would rush around and listen to each other's performances. So finally, my friends said, why don't you do a piano solo? I said, well, I don't really like, Oh, you should do it, Janine. So months before the thing, I told my piano teacher, and we picked a Schumann piece, Robert Schumann, not Clara Schumann. And I worked on it very hard. And then when I went to go there, it was in Stockton, and my mother was very excited. She had my dad. She dragged my little brother along. We all drove to Stockton. And then when we got to the building where I was to play in front of the judge, it wasn't a room that anyone could go into. It was a small practice room. So my mom, who was my security blanket, was not in the room. That was fine. So I go in the room, and I play it. Probably about as well as I could play it. I was aware of being nervous at the beginning and then relaxing and starting to get into actually performing the piece. And when I finished, he just sat there, and he was writing with a pencil. Didn't say a word to me. Remember, I'm 14 years old. And then he said, about how long have you been working on this piece? I said, about 4 months. It's a long time for a 14-year-old. And he said, he tapped his pencil. I heard him go tap, 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 tap on the wooden table. And then he said, you should work on it longer. That's all he said. So we walked out, and my mom said, how'd it go? I said, I don't think it went very well. And then we go to the big grand hallway in the big music building at the University of the Pacific, and everybody's looking. All my friends were all in our gold band coats, and there's Lynn, the clarinetist, getting the command performance again, and there's Diane and, my friends getting their 1s on their flute performances, which I had helped them with. And I got a 3. And we had never seen a 3 in the whole history of all my music band friends going to this festival for 3 years. So that was that for me for performing. And when I was 17, my music teacher said, have you thought of going to conservatory? And I said, and get rated on how I play the piano every day? No, thank you. No, I'm not going to. I play the piano. I don't perform to get graded. And that has been, as you all know, my friends in the music department here know that's how I feel about piano. There were other ways to do that, as we all know, like my dad with a vacuum cleaner. I thought last night, how would Jesus Not that Jesus cares how we play the piano, but how would Jesus have responded to me? And he would have seen a very tender, nervous 14-year-old, and he would have said, "How do you want this to sound? Let's find a little piece of it, and let's just make a little piece of it how you really want it to be. And I'm not here to judge you, and the number doesn't matter. Imagine I'm giving you 5 command performances. Let's hear it now." And I bet you I just would have loosened up and played something a little bit more like Robert Schumann intended. We have so many experiences, all of us in our lives, of being graded or rated or misjudged. If you've ever been misjudged, like they told you did something you didn't actually do, that's a fun one. And so we get a very bad perception of judgment. However, judging from God's point of view is very different. Now, Augustine of Hippo, that's the old Augustine, the early church Augustine, wrote a ton about God's judgment, and I reread it last night, and I'm not going to tell you all of it because I don't want to scare you. But what he says is very interesting about people who wish to be holy and righteous and people who are holy and righteous. God's judgment is pure holiness, pure righteousness, pure truth, pure goodness. And that's what we all want. That's what we want to be, and that's what we want to be a part of. And so when God's judgment comes, it's going to be some kind of enlightenment, literally shedding light and shedding weight, both kinds of enlightenment, where we become purified. And that's something to be desired. God's judgment is good judgment. See the difference between fearing God coming versus having a reverent awe for this breaking in of holiness and righteousness. Now, if I said to you, who wants to be among the holy and righteous? Wouldn't you just go, I want to be among the holy and the righteous? You're not saying, I am really holy and righteous right now. Just that's what I crave. That's what I yearn for. That's what I wish the world were like. There's 2 kinds of salvation that we talk about. There's the salvation coming to an oppressed people, and they can be oppressed by poverty, by political regimes, by dictators, by cruel, inhumane judges, cruelty of the average people. And there's also what we sort of say, what's going to happen on the day of judgment. Now, people who are living in highly oppressed circumstances right now need and want the real world to be better for them, right? And that's something we can help with, something we can work towards. The other judgment that we talk about, what Augustine calls the last judgment, is something that we can look forward to. So now, if you ask me, Janine, if Jesus walked in the door, what would you do? I wouldn't cower in the corner. I think I would stand in the middle of the room and say, I would like to go with you. I would like to be with you. There's a balance between accepting the blessed assurance that we're given and also having a reverent awe for the fact that we are not yet purified, and yet we hope for it and wait for it. And remember, Baruch said you were going to stand up on that hill and raise your heads. And last week, what did Jesus say? He said, stand up and raise your head, for your redemption is near. Amen.